Betsy Hicks-Russ, welcome into Forever Forward.
This is a pleasure. I'm so excited to speak with you and be a part of your audience. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's my pleasure. And I almost feel, in a way, starstruck because I came across your content on Instagram and one of your more viral videos about you and your son, Joey. And if you don't mind, I'd love to start this interview playing the clip that I found you by. Can we do that?
Please do. Please.
And for those listening on Spotify, if you're not watching, I will read the captions as they come up. This past month, Joey's spelling has really taken off. So after years of weekly practice, we got to a point where I was able to ask him the question I've been dreaming of. First, I asked, "Is there anything you've ever wanted to say to me?" His reply, "Mom, I love you more than I could ever show you." I then said, "I am so sorry I underestimated you and spoke about you like you weren't in the room. I have so much guilt over it." His answer, "I get it. Forgiven. Thank you." He wasn't done. He wanted to say one more thing. "Mom, don't change who you are. Today was possibly the most incredible day of my life, not only because after 31 years, my son said he loved me, but also from seeing the joy in his face for being able to express it. If you care for a non-speaking individual, don't fear that you've missed a window. It never closes."
That's a great way to start your podcast, was having your yes, in tears. Thank you.
It really is one of the more beautiful things I've seen on social media. And so let's start here. I know I mentioned your son, and we're going to speak about him today. So who is Joey?
He is a 31-year-old who is diagnosed with autism. He has gotten the diagnosis of severe mental illness, and now that's kind of questionable. I question a lot of that. And he is a compassionate, brilliant, loving, very, very well versed on the world individual who just has opened up to me in the last 6 months for the first time.
You said that he just opened up 6 months ago. Well, I know that 30 years ago, you were told that there would be a very small window of time where you would be able to communicate with him, and then it would close. Can you take us back to that time, and how did that shape your journey as his mother?
My journey is actually really interesting, and I'll make it as quickly as I can to sum it up. But the whole journey is kind of important. So here I am, a mom of a child with a diagnosis of autism, which is not very likely 31 years ago, or well, this is 29 years ago because he was about 2. And so it was very hard to get together with other moms in those days because there was no internet yet. You put a notice up at the library. That's how you found out about things. So it took a while to kind of get a certain level of support and to understand kind of what is going on. And then as I started to get more educated, I met, I left my husband. I met a beautiful pediatrician doctor who was helping me with Joey, who I ended up marrying. And we lived together. For 16 years, we ran a practice together, and I ran his autism clinic. And by autism clinic, I mean, he's a pediatrician, but he specialized specifically on autism, a lot of digestive issues, a lot of immune issues, detoxification. And we had this beautiful practice. So when I tell you that I should have been more aware of the brilliance within Joey, because I'm surrounded by brilliant people. I went to all the conferences. I went with him to all the conferences. I spoke. I was this advocate on diet. I knew a lot of kids in our practice. So it's one thing for an average mom to be told, they're not in there. They're not connected. But I was telling that to other moms. That was, I was the doctor's wife who worked in the clinic, who consoled them and helped them along. So it was an even bigger role than just basically not understanding he was.
I see.
But the misconception that people have still to this day is that just because someone doesn't make eye contact or they don't act like they are paying attention by giving you that eye contact or looking at you in the right direction, that doesn't mean they're not taking it in. And that was my understanding. My understanding was he doesn't know what we're talking about. He's not even looking at us. He's humming a tune. He's doing his echolalia of words that he might know. He's not paying attention.
You really didn't believe that kind of what you were saying was registering at all times? I know in the video you said, "I'm sorry that I spoke about you like you weren't in the room.
Yeah.
At times, did it sort of feel like you just had somebody there, but that wasn't fully present with you?
I always felt he was very angelic, like he was maybe
Yeah.
talking to angels or whatever it might be, but I just didn't feel like I kind of felt like this, and I actually did a video about this years ago, which is kind of fascinating because I will delete it if I ever find it, but, I did a video about this where it's like a foreign language. You know, when you go when like, I go to Mexico often, and I speak just a little bit of Spanish. And so, if I really need to pay attention, if there's somebody I really understand, I can kind of tune in and get a couple of words and maybe understand the gist of it. But for the most part, if a conversation's happening next to you, you just completely tune it out. So that's what I thought he was doing. I just thought he probably only understands a few words, so he's just tuning us out, which would make sense, which made sense in my mind. That was my
Right.
process.
We'll talk about now that you understand what his abilities are, but I would imagine that that probably maybe gave you the credence to either say certain things that maybe now you wouldn't, or just have conversations that maybe you didn't realize, hey, this guy understands everything that I'm saying. And not only does he understand it, but he's processing it more deeply than us verbal people are, because his only sense that he's using in that moment is to hear,
Yeah.
not listening to answer,
Yeah.
but listening to actually listen, because all he can do is listen.
That's exactly it, Mike.
For a while you thought you would not be able to communicate with him. That is actually not the case. Can you help me understand what moment was it where you realized, wait a second, there might be hope. I may be able to have conversations with my son.
During lockdown, I heard about spelling to communicate by 3 people within a matter of 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And it was, and I'm very big into paying attention to the breadcrumbs that the universe is leading me. So, with the fact that I heard about it 3 times, and I knew somebody from the past who had good luck with it, but I always just thought, "Oh, he's a savant. He's just special." I didn't
Yeah.
feel like it was something that Joey was too severe. He'll never be able to do this. He won't be able to sit for it. He won't, all these other things. So when I heard about it 3 times, then it was a matter of, okay, let's see if we can find a therapist. And I live up almost in Canada, in the state of Washington, and there was a therapist. The closest one to me was in Portland, Oregon, which is a good 5-hour drive. But
Wow. Okay.
his twin sister happens to live in Portland, so that it became somewhat doable, and my nephew does. So, I'm like, "Okay, we'll come down once a month, and we're gonna do this. We'll see how it goes, and we'll do this once a month." Well, it's not the kind of thing you could do once a month. Like, you either you're all in or you're not. And
I can imagine.
and at the very beginning, it just doesn't make sense to you, because they start the program assuming competence. They start the program with age-appropriate lesson plans and then asking him to spell based on that. And it's a very simple letter board that the alphabet is divided up into 3, and he basically tries to answer the questions they ask him. And I just wasn't seeing much of anything, and I really thought the program was just way over Joey's head. So that continued for about a year of me, like,
Wow. Okay.
went down 4 times in a year because she had to cancel, I had to cancel, this isn't working, should we spend our money doing this, da 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 da. I only went like maybe 4 or 5 times until I got the notification one day, "I have some news for you." This is what my practitioner said, "My boyfriend just got transferred to Bellingham, the city that I live in, and
Wow.
I'm moving to Bellingham." And I was like, "Oh, okay, okay, okay." So
You want to talk about signs from the universe. I mean,
yeah,
that's pretty crazy.
so it was about 4 months of time that had to go by getting her to move and everything, getting her set up. And then about a year and a half ago, we were able to start going weekly. And then I was committed. I was really committed at this point. We are going to give this a shot. We are going to go once a week. And he would go. And Mike, it's hard when you're paying money and your child maybe cooperates for 5 minutes and then you have to leave, but you still have to pay the money. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of like it was, oh, this is so frustrating because he just wasn't cooperating. He wasn't really being in it. But then little by little, I was like, oh, he's answering that question right. Wow, he had a good day today. He answered 2 questions right. And that was really good. And then it just became this gradual increase of me being like, all right, he knows exactly what's going on. Well, at the beginning, because you're using a split board where you're only using a few letters at a time, you have to know the answer in order to help prompt them for what is going to be, because you have to hold the
Of
right
course.
letter up. But eventually he was able to do this completely on a 26 letter board. And when that became the case, he started to answer questions in his own voice. The first one that he answered that was, I still remember so clearly, is the teacher, this lesson was on deserts. And she showed a picture of a desert at night, and it was covered in white. And she said, wow, Joey, it looks like snow, but it's a desert. So I don't know if it'd be snow. Is that snow or is it sand? And he answered, it's salt. He knew it was salt plains.
Oh my, I thought you were going to say he answered it's sand. But in fact, he took it a step further. He's like, in fact, no, it's neither.
Yeah, he said it's salt. And then we're looking at it, we're like, oh, it is salt. Like,
Can I just, in that moment, right, where you realize, okay, whoa, like there's a lot more going on here than I might have thought there was.
Exactly.
What is that moment like for you as his mother? And for you as somebody who's cared for him in a capacity for that long, not realizing that this might be a little different than I thought it was?
Mike, you almost can't take it in. It's
Yeah.
almost so big that you're unable to completely process it. Like it's not fitting in your brain capacity. So you're almost just kind of like, did that really happen? Like you're questioning yourself, but then you're like watching the video again. You're like, no, that really happened.
You're convincing yourself. Well, you're like, wait a second. Whoa, this really happened.
Because you almost don't want to get too excited. Like you're so used to being let down so many times that you're just like, well, did that just really happen? And so then from there, it just kind of progressed where, he went in one day and immediately spelled hi, Meg, to his teacher. Her name is Meg. And then she was able to start asking him open-ended questions. And it started with just one-word answers, but then eventually he started doing it in sentences to where he's doing it today. And so it's really only been in the last 6 months that this has just been this reality, but it keeps getting bigger and bigger. And yeah.
Well, I can imagine how excited you are to continue to see him grow. And I do want to ask, in the last, call it year or 6 months that this has really begun to blossom, what are some of the conversations that you have had with Joey? Obviously, we've showed the initial one that I found you by, but have there been any other kind of profound things or things you've spoken about that you want to note?
I do. Joey has a big message. He loves advocacy. He loves the subject of advocacy. And he loves specifically, another word I had to look up, systemic advocacy.
He's got me beat there too.
He wants to change systems. He wants to change his systems. Now, interestingly enough, Joey's twin sister, Mia, has her master's in social work. So she's all about changing the systems too. And he really loves that in his sister. But what I am learning right now from Joey, and just very deeply from all different angles, is that just because Joey can communicate doesn't mean he's ready to be normalized. Because what happens is when anybody with a disability shows like an inkling of coming to the other side of this is something that the rest of the world would feel more comfortable with.
Yeah.
And we start trying to morph them to be more like us. And I feel that what we don't want to do out of spelling or even the telepathy piece is we don't, and this is a very harsh way of saying it, but I'm going to say it anyway. We don't want to make it a party trick. We don't want to be, I don't want to be on social media. Look what he said. Look what he said. Joey said, that was really lovely. And it was a very touching moment to be set to say, I have him say, I love you. And I was really happy to get it on film, but I didn't need that. I already knew he loved me. So if I really want to help Joey in any way possible, what I need to hear is, what is your voice and what is it that we can do to come more into your world instead of forcing you into ours.
Do you ever find that you face like backlash from people that say, oh, this is what's happening? Or do you find that people have been generally receptive to yours and Joey's message?
I get both. I mean, if you're on social media, you're open to all kinds of
Oh, I get killed on social media.
And so whatever. Like
Yeah.
that's been the beautiful desensitization of my life, is to just not care anymore. Um, it depends what the message is. There's a lot of challenges between the speaking autism community and the non-speaking autism community. And there's a lot, I really understand it because my best friend's daughter is a speaking autistic. I see the struggles on both sides. They're very, very different struggles. They are extremely different struggles. And here's the honest truth, Mike. I always felt that I had it the hardest. The non-speaking parents have it the hardest. I don't believe that anymore. Joey doesn't, he has been so desensitized to not caring about what other people think and having his feelings hurt and trying to mask and all these other things that speaking autistic individuals have to go through. He has he can enter a beautiful world very, very easily without feeling the challenge of the crossover. And so they're both very difficult. The problem is when one is envious of something that the other one has, and then they kind of treat it like there's only so many pieces of the pie, and
Yeah.
then it becomes like these all internal challenges. There's also a huge demographic of people who can't even wrap their head around that he shouldn't be on a communication device versus a spell board, because the spell board offers unlimited possibilities of words, but a communication device does not. It's often press I want to go to da da da. It's very, very different. Now, I'm not talking typewriting because that's a whole other gamut, but that's a skill that Joey doesn't have yet. He's not able to typewrite yet. That is something we are definitely aiming for, is being able to use a keyboard, but he's not there yet. And so it's really hard for a lot of people to wrap their minds around the fact that, oh, well, certainly in today's day and age, there are better ways to communicate than a basic letterboard. I get that one a lot.
It's actually funny you say that, because I looked up what a letterboard looks like, and I actually thought to myself, I'm sure this works for them, but I have to imagine that maybe there's a more advanced piece of technology that would make this easier. And clearly for him, the answer is that's just not right for this time. But that's a bias that I have, and that's interesting that you've heard that before.
Yeah, and so to explain why, just to give a little bit of an understanding why the simplicity. So with many devices, it requires fine motor skills to maneuver the devices. With a spell board, especially a spell board that is held up to eye's view so that it's right in front of him, it is more of a gross motor than a fine motor skill. And Joey's gross motor skills are very advanced. He rides a bike. He's great with that. And then let's also add the fact that he has binocular vision. So one eye goes in one direction, we didn't know this, again, by the way, until 6 months ago.
Right.
Right. 6 months ago. And so by seeing now that way his eyes go, it is very, very difficult for him to look down and to be able to focus. But looking straight ahead at the board also makes it much easier. And then by having the practitioner hold it, it becomes more of an interactive experience as opposed to just blankly staring at a board. So there's a very specific way that it's taught. And I think a lot of people have I'll just make a stencil board and expect my child to do that. It's not going to work that way. I mean, I'm sure there are some kids that it would work for, but the majority it's not. There's a very specific progression of which it needs to be taught. And it's not it's super cheap for what I'm paying for, but there is a wonderful nonprofit organization that offers free stencils to make your own letterboards, that has free tutorials on how to do it. It's all on my website under BetsyOnTheGo, and I have this beautiful link to the site that will give people the ability to do it themselves. And let's talk about that, because communication should not just be for the wealthy. Communication should not just be for those who are willing to second mortgage their house in order to help their child. Communication needs to be for everybody. And so this organization makes it affordable because anybody can learn to do this. You just have to follow the method. You can't just expect your child to just start spelling.
Yeah, well, thank you for saying all that. And I'll make sure to put that as the first thing in our description. Is that BetsyOnTheGo.com?
BetsyOnTheGo.com. There's lots going on there, Mike.
Wonderful. Well, that'll be, if you're interested, please go check out BetsyOnTheGo.com. I also know on Instagram, you can find you at BetsyOnTheGo, and TikTok as well, if I'm not mistaken. You've got a large following. One thing I do want to note and ask, as I hear you speak about this, I'm still learning about autism and how it really is a spectrum. And there's so much nuance, even in this conversation we're having. Have you found that in some of your advocacy work that sometimes it gets painted with a broad brush?
It does. And then it became, back in the day, it was the autism spectrum, and then autism, and it was considered Asperger's, and then PDOS, and then it was ADHD, and that was the spectrum. And then, of course, we learned Asperger's was a horrible doctor, and we don't use that word anymore. And then it became like high functioning, but then people didn't like high functioning. They like, high needs or different needs. And I get it. All of that is very, very confusing. And I do like the term neurodivergent. I think it's a great term to use, but I definitely feel that there is a challenge both in a diagnostic end and also to communicate to the mass in general that there is a very significant difference between speaking and non-speaking. And there's no way to really know that when
I see.
When with just the term autism. And they are both important diagnoses. They both have incredibly different needs, but they're not the same. So yes,
Right.
It's way, way too broad now from both diagnostics and from just how the education for these individuals needs to be.
Got it. Well, we've spoken so much about your communication with Joey, and I'm curious how he's helped you to learn how to communicate with other individuals. I mean, has this journey for you and with him just helped you generally in life, whether it's to cultivate patience or to be able to more effectively talk to others or meet them where they're at? How has this helped you to become a better communicator in your own right?
I think actually TikTok helped me with that.
How so?
I started filming Joey 5 years ago and posting them on TikTok. And the journey that I took with that, because, as you know, we're in kind of an upheaval time with TikTok right now. We don't know if we're going to be unplugged tomorrow, which is very likely. But I live by the Canadian border, so I'm still going to be posting because I can just
Right.
wanted to. But, my lessons have been from listening to the parents and what everybody is going through. And Joey's message is one very, very powerful, that we need to help people help individuals like himself have a voice. We have to give them autonomy. We have to let them make their own decisions. All of these things need to definitely do. But from what my lessons have been, it's been to not make assumptions as to anyone is going through, because everybody is going, as the saying is, everybody's going through a battle of that which you don't know. And just to approach life with a lot more gentleness, a lot more compassion. When Joey didn't have his vest, people used to scream at him all the time because he doesn't have courtesy. So when he was cycling, he has a vest right now for your listeners that.
I want to talk about this because I know you've pioneered this concept of the vest. Please explain what it is you're referencing.
Yeah. So, and this kind of ties in with the story. So it started in San Francisco. We were living in San Francisco, and Joey loves to bicycle ride. And we would go cycling, and people would constantly be yelling at him. And then we would scream back, "He's autistic," often,
Yeah.
"You asshole," or something like that. But
with some expletives, yeah.
Something like that, sorry. Or we would say, and then they would say sorry, and then they would generally feel bad. And it was just like, it wasn't, but I got it. He was in the way. And if someone's in the way, you're pissed. You're like, get out of the way. And so this is when I created the vest that says "Autistic, be kind." It changed everything. Now, why does it change everything? It changes everything because it answers the questions that are in your head. Why is this person doing this? They must be an idiot, so I'm going to scream at them and let them know they're an idiot. As opposed to, hey, if we can communicate a little bit more, if we could show and explain things in a way that's easy, then maybe we won't have all of these misconceptions. Maybe we won't guess on things, and we'll actually assume that maybe there's an issue going on. And so it's getting away from feeling like you're in the good category, you're in the bad category, blah, 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 and like putting everybody in their categories, and just know that everybody is doing the best that they can and trying to get through this world as best they possibly can. And we all need to have a little bit more compassion for it.
That's certainly the truth. And I will say that whether it's Joey or you or me or anybody listening, we're living in a crazy world and it's not always easy. But I really love that in one sentence, right? Autistic, be kind.
Yeah.
That really should answer any questions you have. Like, why is he doing this or why is he acting that way? It's like, oh, okay. Now I have an understanding and I can try and find some empathy. Hopefully that's helped to calm some of the noise around frustrations with his actions or lack of response, etc. And hopefully it does that for others as well.
Yeah. And we came out, so I've formed a nonprofit that actually sells them, which is also on my website.
Love that.
But we came out with 2 different ones this year. One is special needs be kind, and one is non-speaking be kind, because people didn't having more of the label. It pulls the label out of it a little bit. I don't mind the label. I don't consider autism a bad word. I don't have a problem saying he's autistic. Joey does it. Joey loves his vest. He puts it on every day. I would
Nice.
wouldn't wear it as often as he does, but he always and I respect it, because he just feels that people are kinder and gentler to him when he wears it, and it softens it all.
I love that. And I'm happy that he has that now, because it sounds like for a while he didn't have that and he deserves it. I saw that he recently moved out, partially moved out of the house. And I have to ask you, I guess, 2 questions. One, as you sit here today, did you ever imagine that that would happen? And B, what has that experience been like for you?
I really want to answer this chronologically, because I want to go take you back a couple of years, just 2 years,
Okay.
where my friends who love me so much, family and friends, were just basically wanting me to give up on Joey. He wasn't spelling, he wasn't communicating, he was having constant meltdowns. He was constantly hitting his head and having anxiety attacks, and it was really, really grim. And I couldn't even fathom how a home would take care of him besides myself. Like what was going to happen to him in this situation. And my friends and family were seriously worried about my health, and they were just saying, you need to let this go and just put him in a place that's going to take care of him, and just let it go. And I couldn't. I kept going, because it wasn't that I was looking for all the problems to go away, but I wanted it to be manageable. And in the course of that time, I signed up with Partners for Housing, which is an incredible organization that helps families create their own residences through things like Section 8 housing and their funding through the state. I started to work with them, and I really was comfortable in the fact that this was going to be a long process, because they say,
Yeah, it was going to be a long road.
but it wasn't.
Okay.
Started to happen. And this never happens to anybody, by the way, but the very first application I made for HUD was accepted. And
Wow.
it was accepted in a different state, which is part of what I talk about, is that if you have a person with a disability, they can be accepted for HUD Section 8 in a different state, and then reasonable accommodations can move them to your state. There's a whole video I've done about this. So it started to happen faster than I could wrap my head around. And then it was like, what is this going to look like? What is this going to look like? I can't even dream this up. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because so many people would say to me, I just don't even see how this is going to happen. My advice is to start taking small little steps, because all of a sudden it starts to reveal itself and it starts to open up in a way that is going to happen. And that's exactly what happened to us. Our caregiver fell into place. The apartment perfection fell into place. Like that was an insane story all on its own, was finding his apartment. And everything just kind of started to happen in the momentum of which it happened. And I felt like I was just, I was on a whitewater raft, but I was headed downstream, and it was pretty mellow. We were going real slow.
Yeah.
There wasn't a big flow going on, but it was happening in a way that I could comprehend it, and I could break it down, and I could make it happen. And it's been now 3 months, and it's been incredibly successful, and he loves his apartment. And you're right, though. This is nothing I could have ever have dreamt up. And I think that's, Mike, this is a big message to me in general for your listeners that I really want to make sure to convey today. Frequently, people say to me, I have a 3-year-old. I can't even imagine what I'm going to do if they're not speaking by the time they're 15, or that, what I'm going to do when they need long-term housing. And I'm just like, just stop, please. Like, people, they like to scare you into thinking that you need to plan for the future now. Okay. And I never felt inspired to plan for the future, in the sense that I didn't know where I was going to live. And then, of course, my husband died. That's a part of my story too. The doctor that I was married to died. And there's so much to my story. So
Yeah.
all of that was kind of happening. And I am such a different person, and Joey is such a different person than we were 30 years ago, that please stop being so hyper focused on the future and just focus on now. And don't tax yourself financially to the point where you feel like, oh, I only have this window. I've got to get this figured out in this small window of time, because as I said before, the window doesn't close. It's constantly regenerating. The brain cells are constantly forming. You are not losing the window. Take it one step at a time, as your family can handle. Moving the needle forward. I always like to say that. Did I move the needle forward today? Like, did I take one action step that might make it a little bit easier for tomorrow? I love doing that, but then there's days where I don't feel like doing anything, and that's okay too. I just really want to take the pressure off the young parents today, to make them feel like it's now or never. We got to fix it now, because maybe it's
Yeah.
supposed to be fixed.
Look, I can understand maybe why somebody might feel like I need to fix this now, because as people, I feel like we're wired to want to fix and solve and just get everything right. That's like our instinct. But as you've lived it, clearly patience is a virtue. And as you said, the window never closes. Like, I feel like a core element of your story is, and Joey's story is, that the window was always open. Even if you didn't always realize it, the window never closed.
Right.
I want to ask you one more thing about that day where you dropped him off. Like, as you get back in the car and he's not with you, and maybe this is a question for any parent dropping their child off, whether it's at college, but what is the feeling? Is it bittersweet? Is it happy? Is it relieved? What are you feeling in that moment?
I was in relief. I would say I cried more in the days leading up to it. But then once the day actually came, coming home and not having to do anything, and not having to wake up in the middle of the night, and not having to do anything like that, that was a tremendous relief. And, I
Yeah.
got a lot of hate for that, Mike. It was very funny. I did a video about Ron and I becoming empty nesters, and how all the things that we started to do once Joey moved out, like we started playing Nintendo, and, just
Yeah.
and all these other things. And the video did phenomenal on TikTok and Instagram, all with beautiful comments. And then for some reason, somebody on Facebook thought it was the most horrible thing, because they didn't have any context to the fact that I was a good mom and I did love my son. And they started berating me for dumping my autistic kid off and celebrating because of it. And it's just super interesting, because I think it hits a lot of triggers for a lot of people. What does it mean to be an empty nester, and this kind of guilt that, you know what it is? It's martyrdom. It's this belief that we have to be a martyr in life to achieve our goals of why we're here, and that we have to give things up in order to win the kingdom, or whatever it is that they want to say. It's
Yeah.
it's this feeling that we have to constantly sacrifice, and that's not what we're here for. We're here for expansion. We're here to make
Yeah.
more. We're here to create more. We're here to be more. We're here to take thought where it's never been before. We're here to educate in ways that have never been educated, and create beautiful ways of thinking of things, and create more love in our life. That's why we're here. We're not here to judge anybody. And so when we have that kind of understanding, that this whole journey, when I go back in my journey and I think of the last 30 years of my life, and I think of the countless amount of pain and the things that I missed out on because I couldn't go because of Joey, or all of those things. And you know what? In that one moment when he moves out, not 1 ounce of it comes back to me as to Imagine the life I could have had. Not about that, because I am who I am today, and I like who I am today because of all the journey that I've had with Jilly. And a lot of people are not so blessed to have a challenging enough blow kind of happen to them that causes them to become a bigger person, a more awake person, a more alive person, a happier person. There's if you don't have contrast in your life, it's like a trampoline. You have these like little bounces. You're not having a lot of fun if you're just taking tiny little bounces. But if you have big bounces and you are whee the whole way up,
Yeah.
you're really
Yeah.
you've been so far down that you blast yourself up forward. And there is no replacement for that kind of joy to now experience of I have been in the lowest of low places, and there still is. I still have really hard days. Joey's
Yeah.
our life a good portion of the time. We still have challenges. We still struggle, but it's recognizing that it's okay, and it's okay, and it just creates a better humankind. Really, is what it creates.
Man, well, I wish I could take that and put it in a bottle and put it on my desk. Everything that you just said. I mean, like just this general idea of freeing ourselves from this perceived necessity of martyrdom, right? Like I do that all the time. And I appreciate that you said, look, I felt relieved, because guess what? You probably did feel relieved, right? You adore Joey and love him, but you sacrificed so much and you don't regret the sacrifice, but you sacrificed. And so as you look back retrospectively, I'm sure you're like, whew, that was a lot. And I love him and I love me. But wow, I'm in my car. He's safe. He's somewhere else. And I'm an empty nester. Like, I think that's probably just a lack of self-awareness on whoever made that comment. But like, what a joy and a blessing it is to have been able to suffer in a way that allows you to see the joy. I want to close with this. And I know that you spoke a bit about kind of Joey's interest in systematic change.
Yeah.
But if Joey were to share one lesson with the world, if Joey were sitting here right now and wanted to share one thing with all of us through his experiences, what do you think he would like to impart on all of us?
To not care what anybody thinks, to not look at others' eyes to see if they're staring at you, to not care if they consider you weird, to not take any labels that they want to throw your way. I think if Joey had a message to everybody, it would be who you are and true to yourself. Feel the love for yourself, feel the love for those around, and have the compassion that we all really need to possess. I mean, we are headed into beautiful places. Autism is coming into light in a way that it's never come into light before. And they are my leaders. Joey and those like him, those are my leaders. Those are the ones that I'm listening for the words and the guidance from. So let's just stop labeling. Let's stop making assumptions on to the way people are. And more importantly, please stop caring what people think. Get out there with your kids. If you are a parent listening to this right now, and you are afraid for what others are going to think or say to you, that is the least of your concern. Go out there and have the joyful interactions with your child in the way that feel good for you. And for Joey likes to stuff his arms in his coat. People think that I'm doing it to him and they clobber me over it. They're like, why are you making your child wear a straitjacket? I'm like, no, this is something he likes to do. It makes him more comfortable. And
in every clip I've seen of Joey with his arms in his coat, he actually looks like he's having a blast.
Oh, he's so it's when he gets arms in the coat that he gets a little bit nervous. So that was an ultimate lesson to me too. It's like, well, but people are going to say I'm a terrible mom. And they do. Not only think that, they do. I have a whole video about that pinned at the top of my site. It says story time, and that's the story of this woman just berating me for having Joey put his arms in.
Yeah.
What's more important, somebody else's opinion or that your child is comfortable and happy?
100%. And what better way to wrap up a conversation like this with something like what you just said? I mean, that is the call to adventure in life is who cares? Get out there, whether you're a mom with children or you're somebody that's 16 listening to this that has a dream. Like you've got somebody right now telling you, now is the time. Yeah. This is the year. Be yourself. Don't fear judgment. And let's go advance whatever it is that we're trying to improve. So I can't thank you enough for coming on. I feel incredibly blessed to have just had this with you, and I want to thank you once more.
Oh, I feel blessed to have got to speak with you too. It's wonderful what you're doing. And thank you for being out there for everybody who gets to listen to you and your wonderful messages.